So Lord, may the words of my mouth and meditations of our hearts together be acceptable in your sight. For Lord, you are our rock and you are our Redeemer. In your name we pray and say thank you. Amen.
Amen.
Now the great sage and Jedi master Yoda said, "Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering." Now everyone is afraid of something. Everyone is facing a different fear. And fear is an emotion that is a contagion. Sometimes irrational, sometimes reactionary, but definitely paralyzing. And fear has become a part of our daily lives. Now, I remember when I was a teenager in the 90s. Yes, I've dated myself. After the Cold War, but before the War on Terror. So we're in this wonderful peacetime period where the biggest nightmare for us was Bill Clinton and his issues and Y2K, or the prophecies of Nostradamus and the end of the world coming with the new millennium. Now I'm sure that other folks remember from their childhood. I'm sure y'all remember duck and cover. You know, duck and cover, duck and cover. And now you hear, if you see something, say something. Fear motivates and makes more money than anything else. And the fear that we deal with in our lives has created the military-industrial complex and has even expanded to the prison-industrial complex. But also, fear sometimes works for us. We like it, and we like the results of fear. See, we reframe fear into being preventative. That's why people buy handguns. That's why people lock their doors. Now we are trying to prevent someone from coming in our homes and take our stuff or worse. But if you ask yourself, what is the statistical likelihood of someone walking down the street and just turning doorknobs to see if they're open? I don't know. Is it high? Maybe, maybe not. But even if it isn't high, if it is or isn't, after we get tired of locking the doors, we move to the suburbs. We're tired of this crime and everything else. And so then, but here's the thing that's realized, is some of our preventative measures, they come from self-preservation. That's what we're really getting in. And so, it's all about common sense. So to stop us from getting in a car accident, we have seat belts. That's common sense. We have car airbags. Common sense. Or if we're home alone, we have light alert. I fall down, I can't get up. We have that, because common sense. Because if you fall and you need help and no one's to shout to, you press the button. But there is a difference between acting out of unfounded fear and recognizing that there is a rational threat to your well-being. Where, as I used to say, as there is a clear and present danger. Now, when we read today's text in the gospel, we focus on the storm. But what does the storm represent? Is this really about the storm, or is it about the fear that we cannot control? And how do we break through fear to the other side? Now, water in the ancient Near East, the idea of water in an ancient Near East context, it represented chaos and the unknown. So when we read the first creation story in Genesis, when God separates the waters, God is creating a world out of the chaos. In the book of Exodus, when Moses is parting the Red Sea, He is guiding the Hebrew people through chaos and the unknown. And so similarly, in our text this morning, we have a journey across water, across the unknown, this chaos, into Gentile territory. And fear confronts us head on. Fear confronts the God's disciples head on. But here's the question. What is the relationship between fear and faith? And to examine the theme, we have to ask the question, what are the disciples fearful of? The disciples, they cry out, do you not care that we are perishing? Is the disciples' fear rational? Kind of. I say kind of. Well, I mean kind of. Well, there are always storms, and I'm afraid, and I'd be afraid too if I was in a storm on a boat. And we can understand what they're going through. But even to say that, to use the phrase going through, or as in the passage says, going across or over, it can be understood in different ways. The through in Greek can be translated as going through something or toward a destination. Going through an obstacle, or going through something in your mind. To review. So let's wait a minute. Let's bring it back. Let us review the situation. Simon, Andrew, and James, and his brother John, the disciples that we're familiar with, are fishermen. Have you ever met a fisherman who cannot swim? It's like a librarian who can't read. Have you ever met a fisherman who can't swim? No. So if each of those guys grabbed someone, there are multiple boats, but if each of those guys who are fishermen, so I'm going to assume they can swim, grabbed one other person, 8 people are saved at least. So again, is this really about the storm? At the beginning, they had enough faith to get in the boat. But it's about something bigger. Now, the adjective to describe the storm, the calm, and the fear in verses 37, 39, and 41 is the same. It's the same word, mega. So we have the mega storm, we have the mega calm, and we have the mega fear. And the dialogue between the disciples and Jesus is, do you not care that we are perishing? Jesus says, why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? Let's put all this stuff together. Let's start putting things together. So in the midst of both the mega storm and the mega calm, our brothers and sisters in the boat have mega fear and micro faith. Again, our brothers have mega fear and micro faith. They have massive misgivings about getting in the boat with Jesus. And they have minimal trust in who Jesus is. Because they start asking the question, then who is this? Well, you know who this is. You got the boat with him. But again, let's pay attention again. What have they said? They have begun to review. They have begun to process. They are processing what they have just gone through. And so in the midst of fear, even we get caught up in our heads. Our brains get caught in these feedback loops of where the voice in our head becomes louder and louder. And then everything just becomes deaf. We can't hear anything else but what's in our heads. And the irony is that living in fear and living in the fear of the unknown means that you will never be in control. Living in fear of the unknown guarantees you will never be in control. See, the fear has power over you. See, to a certain extent, the dread scenario that we are trying to avoid starts taking over and living with us in our daily lives. Through our preoccupation with preparation, we have locked ourselves into a fate made out of fear. So one person's preparation has now become someone else's oppression. See, what we thought was a cocoon of safety is a tomb of denial and desolate solitude, where desperation becomes depression. See, the world that would be great again, and the America that would be great again, is graded down into false promises and new enemies. And these enemies face us in the mirror. Now, I know people would say, Brother Letman, Pastor, Sloan, what you mean us? I am not a Trump supporter. I am black. I voted for Hillary. And this did not happen when Obama was president. It didn't happen. No. But let's talk about what did happen when Obama was president. He did not separate children, but he did deport 100,000 people a year. And in 2015 to 2016, ICE, our favorite people, had an immigration quota to keep at least 34,000 people in detention facilities, spending up to $2 billion to do then what we now see as inhumane. And so when I went to Capitol Hill, and we were lobbying for ecumenical advocacy day, so it was different groups from different denominations going and talking to our different senators and congressmen about these issues, and the laws we were talking about in particular were the Safe Sentencing Act of 2015 and the Justice Safety Act of 2015. The politicians were not convinced by the moral argument of you shouldn't lock people up. You shouldn't keep people in jail for 20 years for minor marijuana offenses. They were not convinced by that. But they were convinced, Republicans were convinced, that, you know what? This makes sense because it saves us money. So our talking points when we went to go talk to these politicians were not about morals, but about money. And even during the Obama administration, it wasn't about noble ideals, it was about numbers. We can pretend to reframe that mega fear has turned into MAGA fear, in terms of making America great again fear, as much as we want. But we have to recognize that the mega means make the empire great again. And the empire is still empire. And we are called to work for the kingdom of God. And it should not matter who is emperor. Because that is where we have put our faith, is in the emperor instead of who, in terms of the King Jesus. We have put our faith in those who make promises instead of the one who has preserved us. Now, of course, is there an equivalent between Obama and Trump? Of course not. But the reality is that the policies that we are decrying about were the policies that were put in place in 2008 and 2009. They were the policies that we don't want to face in terms of he was assuming that he was going to be able to continue he was going to ramp up his deportation so that later in the political cycle, he would be able to bring in amnesty, which is great. But guess what? His negotiation and his idea failed because he got the red wave. And they wanted to take their country back. So all that happened was folks just kept on getting deported. So he made a political choice instead of a moral choice. A choice that was politically expedient instead of a choice that was guided by his faith. And that might say you might not get reelected to that second term, but you did the right thing. We have to recognize when empire is still empire and what we trust in. But when we think of faith, when we think of trust, we think of cognitive assent, we think of the mind, we think of buying into something. But in the ancient Near East context, in the old school context, in the Hebrew context, in the Jewish context, faith is trust. It was established for you. Like it's mentioned in in the book of Hebrews chapter 11. Faith is built by the ancestors. Faith or trust is built out of the living testimony of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And faith is a boat that can't sink. See, trust is built on something that I like to say is one of my favorite verses. It's from 1 Corinthians. It says, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. But then we still have to ask the question, so how's that fear working for you? How much have we lost from fear? How many opportunities have we missed? How many frisbees and hula hoops could have been purchased with the money spent in the 1950s on bomb shelters? How many trips to Disney World could a family have gone on instead of prepping for the New World Order, for the Y2K, for Obama to take people's guns, or whatever other crazy excuse is this week? But let me give you a more specific example. What if people had banned the parents? I'm going to give you an actual person. The parents of this Arab American, his name is Amos Muzad Yaqub Kairos. That's a good name. Again, what if people had banned this man? His name is Amos Muzad Yaqub Kairos. Now, this Syrian American, he founded this organization called the American Lebanese Syrian Associate Charities. Again, that is the American Lebanese Syrian Associate Charities. And I will tell you that I have actually recently given to this organization, and I bet you a lot of you have too. See, fear can deny us so much. You see, Amos Kairos changed his name. He changed his name to Danny Thomas. And the American Lebanese Syrian Associate Charities is the fundraising arm of St. Jude's Hospital. Now, how many times have we laughed at Make Room for Daddy or the Danny Thomas Show? And I know y'all are thinking, that boy has never seen the Danny Thomas Show. I have seen it. And how many times have we laughed at his daughter? Remember his daughter, Marlo Thomas, and that girl? More importantly, how many lives have been saved by St. Jude? But Sloan, Danny Thomas was a good one. And I know we've heard that before, but he was a good one. See, those Syrians came to America when we were worried about the communists. And they were discriminating, and we were busy discriminating against other people. But again, I ask, is this really about the storm? In the past few weeks, we have been hit with the most recent gust of America's hurricane of racism and violence. And many people are yelling, do you not care that we are perishing? Do you not care that we are being destroyed? What about the children at the camps? And I'm not being cynical, but I'm being serious when I say, I'm looking for the guy who's asleep on the pillow in that boat. Because that's the only one I can trust in this storm. Because again, every single person who was yelling on TV this morning, on Beat the Press and everything else, were okay when it was a different administration. It might have not been as dramatic, it have not have been as draconian, but it was still wrong. And so if we're going to be about it, you got to be truly about it. So I'm going to trust the guy on the pillow because he's the one who can calm the storm. You see, I believe there's a difference between self-preservation and the preservation of the American way. But as Christians, we need to be clear that neither are our priority. Because as Christians, we are called to preserve our neighbor as ourselves. And that speaks beyond either of those continuums. This moral crisis is bigger than one instance, one executive order. We have to take this to the macro level. We have to see the pattern and we have to see how it fits into the whole story. And that means we have to acknowledge the value system that created this. We have to acknowledge that segregation inspired South African apartheid, the same value system that ripped children from their homes in Africa are on the plant and rip their children from homes on the plantations and rip children from their families on Indian reservations and rip children from their homes and put them in foster care systems is the same system that's ripping children away from their homes right now by ICE. We have to recognize that the same value system put people onto the first stock market, which was being the stock of people on Wall Street. We have to take a good look at the system that values free land, free labor, cheap cotton, cheap gas, and cheap clothes. Basically, we need to look at the system that sells everything at Walmart. But the reality is that the prices that we roll back at Walmart are connected to the rolling back of regulation, are connected to the rolling back of immigration, it's connected to the rolling back of civil rights, and rolling back the gospel of Jesus Christ. We want cheap grace without doing the work of justice. And the big picture of the gospel isn't about calming one storm or one exorcism. It's about breaking through every storm. It isn't about freedom. It's about freedom for all of those who are in spiritual and physical bondage on the other side. It's about going from breaking through something to breaking chains. See, when you go to difficult places, things get rocky. When you're in the midst of storms, all you can do is trust. And there are always storms when you go into Gentile territory. But that is where we are called and challenged to be. We are challenged to trust God. Because, my brothers and sisters, this is not an aberration. This is real. And it's been going on for a long time. The challenge is, how long will we go along with it? We're challenged to the call of breaking the chains of racism. We are challenged to the call of breaking the chains that bind this country in fear. We are challenged to the call of going to a new territory. The call of new ways of thinking and new ways of living. The call to get in the boat and stay in the boat for the whole journey. We are called and challenged to trust Jesus more. We are called to face these immoral threats and act. We are challenged to preach the gospel that Jesus' boat doesn't sink. And you cannot sink this gospel ship. The gospel pushes us forward faithfully through fearful storms toward our destination of faithful mission. It pushes us forward to feed the hungry. It pushes us forward to heal the sick, to clothe the naked. But more than anything else, at this time, it calls us to welcome the immigrant. Amen and amen.